This is actually the longest storm I've ever experienced living here like this in 10 years. In June. Holy shit. All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I'm your host, Sandy Shallis. Last week in collapse, and I could make this show about just my own place, me in collapse last week. But no, we've got a really busy show, and it is great to see all of you. Kim, thank you for moderating. I know Looney Tunes is going back and forth between the letter hack because it's election night in the United States for primaries, and I've already done my piece. And tonight is we'll see what happens with the Westchester County, New York, and Bronx. Jamal Bowman, I think that, I don't know, but we have to talk about the world. You know, there's a world outside of just us, but there is a lot going on. And in South Dakota, Minnesota, I feel for people. There's a dam about to break, and we'll probably have all that news next week. But for all of you, I just want to say good evening. I know there's a lot of people watching on TwitX, and welcome. And if you want to come over here and be part of the chat, that's great. We need to get started. It's a busy one. I've got lots of stuff for you guys. So let's go to last week in collapse. And here we go. So it's a weekly newsletter, as you know, the compilation. It is quite well put together. And actually, you know, I told you this before. I thought it was Jared Brock. It's not Jared Brock. The person has no problem with me, but it is not Jared Brock, actually. And you could get the Substack and subscribe to the Substack. Thank you. This is the 130th newsletter, which is quite a feat. And here we go. Are you ready, everybody? Okay. The head of the UN World Food Program claimed that 40% of land is degraded, a figure that could jump to 95% by mid-century. A growing fraction of the world's land and population is therefore dependent on food imports. See Morocco. And with worsening agricultural harvests, drought, and supply difficulties, feeding these people will not be easy. Roughly 100 hectares of land are desertified or degraded every year, equivalent to, well, a lot. Borneo is just under 75 million hectares, and Wikipedia lists it as the third largest non-continental island. So at that, I will start us out with the first video. Hang on. I've had a very crazy, I've actually been out. And this is the thing about this part is, as a gardener, as someone who grows my own food, as a lot of you do, I'm very interested in the soil. I mean, I use amendments, I use compost, but I didn't have enough compost this year. I mean, it's not always going to be easy. I don't think it is. I think it's going to be difficult for everyone who does what I do, or just growing food for the masses. I mean, we're an overshoot. There's just too many people. But let's go to the first video. Hang on, and I will get us ready. It's about food security. It's about the soil, which is, it's very, very interesting, I think. So let's get there.
Droughts and floods.
And here
are happening so often in some of the poorest parts of the world that crops can no longer grow there, says Martin Frick, director of the World Food Programme's Global Office. He told the BBC that these areas have reached a point where they have no harvests left because extreme weather has made the land unusable. As a result, parts of Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America now rely on humanitarian aid. Frick warned that if we don't stop land degradation worldwide, even richer countries will start having crop failures. The Global Environment Facility says 95% of the world's land could become degraded by 2050, and the UN says 40% is already degraded. When soil degrades, it loses the organic matter that makes it fertile, according to EU scientists. This means it can't support plant life well, reducing crop yields and its ability to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Soil is the second largest carbon sink after the oceans and is key to fighting climate change. Frick explained that healthy, carbon-rich soils are essential for fixing climate change because they absorb a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. Land degradation can be caused by modern farming techniques and extreme weather, like prolonged droughts followed by heavy rains. Scientists say extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and severe due to climate change. While it's hard to link specific droughts to climate change, global warming has made some, like the recent one in East Africa, more likely. In Burundi, heavy rains and flooding have damaged 10% of farmland, making it unusable for the next harvest. A UN report in March found that cereal crops in Sudan's Darfur region were 78% below the average of the past 5 years because of civil war and drought. Flash floods in Afghanistan this year destroyed 24,000 hectares of already degraded land. As soil degrades and crops fail, global food supplies will be strained and migration from affected areas will increase, says Pravina Sridhar from Save Soil. She warned that this could lead to a world where survival is the only priority. Frick said he doesn't like doomsday scenarios but admitted the situation is very worrying. He suggested that local farming to rejuvenate the land could help avoid such a disaster. He noted that dependence on a few crops and a few exporting countries causes food shortages when those harvests are disrupted, as seen with the grain shortages in East Africa caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Frick said that to address hunger and land degradation, the world's poorest should be encouraged to restore degraded land through regenerative practices funded by carbon credits schemes. He mentioned a project in Niger where local women built micro-dams to slow water movement, created basins with dung and straw, and planted trees. This transformed a desert area into productive agricultural land in 3 to 5 years without artificial irrigation.
All right, so that was, I thought, pretty good. It does bring up issues that we have to think about, different ways of enabling these lands to be irrigated. As I showed you in the video I made about Gaza and Israel, the how drip irrigation and saline, cleaning, using ocean water and desalination is one way. But if you're not in an area where there's any water, what are you going to do? And we're going to see that. We're seeing it. I mean, this is what's happening all over. But again, as someone who grows food here, this year for me, it's been very difficult because of the rain and the heat, and the weeds are overwhelming. So let's move on. And a 6.3 earthquake struck 25 kilometers off Peru in the ocean, causing no damage. Flooding in Assam affected 105,000 people. In southern China, flooding damaged thousands of homes, 8,000 hectares of crops, and killed at least 12 people. The city of Gulen saw 30 plus centimeters of rain in 6 hours, the largest flood on record. Drought, poverty, and land degradation in Nigeria continue. So it's all around the world. At least 2 people died from heat stroke in Cyprus following a Mediterranean heat wave. A heat wave struck southern Russia, bringing temperature to as high as 39 C in some places. A wildfire in LA, last week, this is last week in collapse, is growing, forcing evacuation of 1,200 residents. A recent study in European Geosciences Union confirms the obvious. Large wildfires create hotter and drier temperatures by trapping soot in the air, which contributes to a feedback loop that makes future wildfires in the region likely. So I wanted to go through this article, but let me see where we were. All right, we're going to go through this article because this was the one, the first one. I showed you the video that pretty much went over most of this. But this was the UN food chief. Poorest areas have zero harvests left, zero. The droughts and flooding have become so common in the poorest places, of course, on Earth that the land can no longer sustain crops. And that was the director of the World Food Program's Global Office. And that's exactly what the video went over, this article. So the next one they were talking about was too hot for peace. Desertification, global warming, fueling Middle East unrest. The increasing temperatures in the region are making it harder, making natural resources, especially water, even scarcer and making warfare conditions harder than ever. Much of 2023 was marked by global uncertainties that largely eclipsed the impending environment crisis from international media in Israel and most of the Middle East. Since the terror attacks of October 7th, ecological subjects have been given even less room than before as security concerns loom drastically. However, with the upcoming summer, the extreme heat is becoming a common enemy to Israelis, Palestinians, and neighboring countries, along with bombs, regardless of what side they take in the current war. And again, 100 million hectares of land are being desertified every year. Every year. And the water scarcity and drought in the Middle East is a big problem. So this is a very interesting article. You can get it in the link in the show notes. All right. To address a predicted decline in natural water supply, 16% by 2050. See how everything's now 2050. It used to be 2100. And up 25% by 275. Israel is significantly expanding its seawater desalination capacity, which I talked about. Why can't they help Gaza? They don't want to help the Palestinians. They could have a long time ago. However, desalination is either too expensive or impractical for most countries in the Middle East and Palestine, considering that many populational groups remain in poverty due to the scarcity of water resources, and those impoverished groups become potential targets for extremist ideologies, recruiting potential terrorists. Global warming is really becoming a catalyst in the Middle East for violence. It has been for years. It has been for years. Obviously, okay? We've seen it. We've seen it with our own eyes. So I want to see, do I have okay, and if the recent study in European Geosciences Union confirms the obvious about the large wildfires, which I already went through, but that's another big problem. These fires, and I'm just grateful that this year I was not gardening with a face mask on like last year. Worldwide, this June, will probably be the hottest June on record, perhaps exceeding last year by 0.2 C. One scientist indicated that June 13th, 2024 was the all-time hottest day on Earth since records began. Observers are forecasting the Paris Olympics to be the hottest Olympic Games. Yet in Australia, winter has begun as one of the coldest starts of the winter in decades. So here's the daily temperature anomalies, and we see them again going up as we always do. Always do. right? And the global surface air temperatures, if you could see them, 14th of June. Hot, hot, hot. Yes, it's hot. A heat wave hit Taiwan, and Japan is expecting its hottest summer ever. South Korea felt its hottest June day of all time, 37.7 degrees Fahrenheit. A heat wave also struck Brazil. A storm in Chile forced 11,000 to leave their homes and also killed one person. A landslide in Ecuador killed 8. 8 plus, 11 still missing. Several also died in Guatemala and El Salvador from damage caused by excessive rainfall. Extreme weather is upon us, and there is nothing you can do to change it. Now, let's see. The Guardian had said, what if there is just no solution? How are we all in denial about the climate crisis? This guy wrote a book, Tad DeLay, suggests there is no rosy roadmap to go forward. But of course, there's things we can do. You're in denial about the climate crisis. We all are, argues the American scholar Ted DeLay. Right-wing climate deniers are not the only ones with a problem, he says. When we speak in early June after the release of his book, Future of Denial. For denial doesn't only amount to rejecting the evidence. He argues it also consists of denying our role in the climate crisis, absolving ourselves through carbon offsets, hybrid cars, local purchases, recycling, and in this far more of us are implicated. Now, we talk about this. We do talk about this, don't we? And I'm going to go back here because this is going to bring us to the second video, which is the Hopium video. And, this guy, he's right, though. A lot of people think, okay, it's fine. We're going to be fine. We're going to have all of those wonderful things. Green energy is going to just take us out of the problem. Business as usual can go on. Oh, So let's play this. Oops. You know what happens? I don't set it up in scenes. There's a way to do it, but I'm Well, I hope you all know that we're saved. Yeah, here we go. We are doing great, aren't we? Hopium for everyone. Enough hope to go around. All right. Let us continue now. Over 1,050 pilgrims have died from heat waves during this year's Hajj. And I do have another video for that. temperatures reached as high as 51.8. That's 125 degrees, 51.8 in Mecca. It hit Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran. Plus, their groundwater reserves are being depleted. So, I want to play another video. I know maybe you're thinking, oh my gosh, she's got so many, but they're important. Some of these news stories are better than I can explain it. So let us watch the next one, because this is a really important story and it brings up a lot of different issues. Lots of them. So we're gonna definitely discuss that after we watch this.
Our last story today is about the Hajj. Over 1,300 people died this year during the annual pilgrimage due to a heat wave. Now, heat-related deaths at the Hajj are not new. They have been happening for centuries. But this year, the death toll was unusually high. It's because of exceptional circumstances. Rising temperatures, coupled with climate change, meant conditions that some humans could not endure. They collapsed on the streets. Many died of heat stroke. Saudi Arabia says it is not a failure of the system. But is that true? Our next report tells you.
For millions of Muslims across the globe, this is the journey of a lifetime. The Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It must be completed by all Muslims with the means at least once in their lives. But this year, the annual pilgrimage took a deadly turn. Over 1,300 people died during the Hajj, all because of intense heat. Now, the Gulf has long dealt with high summer temperatures, but the climate crisis has pushed it above normal limits. This year, a heat wave supercharged by climate change meant temperatures soared over 50 degrees. Now, the Hajj season changes every year. So this year, it was in June, which is one of the hottest months in the kingdom. And while there are air-conditioned facilities, the Hajj involves a lot of walking. Pilgrims walk an average of 4 hours every day. So with millions walking in the baking sun, many started to lose consciousness. Some even collapsed on the roads.
Yesterday we were on our way and we saw corpses on the road. They were covered white on the road. Because the temperatures here are really high. And I'm not just talking about old people, young people have died too.
Many people were on the ground, tired and losing consciousness. In Arafat it was the same. They were losing consciousness and were suffering from heat stroke and laying on the ground.
Some of these pilgrims were older. They had saved money all their lives to take the Hajj. They had underlying conditions. That, coupled with the risk of extreme heat, was deadly. Many died of a heat stroke. Pilgrims have since blamed poor infrastructure. They said it was badly organized. But Saudi Arabia says it wasn't the failure of the kingdom. Instead, it was an issue of illegal permits. The Hajj is one of the world's largest religious gatherings. Every year, Saudi Arabia issues nearly 1.8 million permits. Now, these permits are allocated to countries on a quota system. Individuals get it through a lottery. Official licenses can cost up to several $1,000s. But many either don't get these licenses or they can't afford them. So they enter the country unregistered. They risk arrest and deportation if caught. But unlicensed pilgrims also don't get access to the facilities like air-conditioned buses, free water and food supplies.
We thought we were about to die. We didn't even have the strength to reach the steels due to the extreme heat. My hands were shaking, my body was about to collapse, and I was unable to continue.
Countries are now cracking down on tourist agencies facilitating the Hajj for unlicensed pilgrims. But it's impossible to ignore the elephant in the room. That's climate change. Heat-related deaths in the Hajj are not new. They were recorded way back to the 1400s. But with rising temperatures and an older population, pilgrims are now more vulnerable, which means Riyadh will have to find ways to adapt to this climate crisis, or else it could put millions at risk in the coming years.
All right. It could put millions at risk in the coming years. Why do it? If it's going to put millions at risk in the coming years, what's the point? This is the problem with Orthodox religions, and it is going to kill people. 1,300 this year. It's just, and they're going to go. Stay home. The government of Saudi Arabia, stay home. Don't come. It's canceled. Do it a different way, but it isn't going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I'm talking about the orthodoxies, the religions that you're going to die for Allah, you're going to die for Jesus. Sorry, but that's how I see it. I think it's quite sad. And there was a comment by Stephen. He said, it's just totally unnecessary. Well, the problem is it's not totally unnecessary to them. And that is where, the changes have to come. And these societies are going to have to realize this shit is over. It is over. Across Central Asia, composed mostly of deserts, sandstorms are becoming more common. As the Aral Sea disappears, these dust and sandstorms also aggravate glacial melt in the Caucasus and the Altai Mountains. Around 1,700 wildfires have been identified across Brazil's tropical wetlands before the dry season even begun. At least 125 people in Mexico have died from heat stroke just this year. India has logged 40,000 plus suspected heat stroke cases already and 100 plus deaths. Meanwhile, near the India-Bangladesh border, landslides killed 15 people. The American state of Maine experienced its hottest June day, as did some places in Atlantic Canada. Now, we've been watching all week what's been going on in India, and it's just been insanely hot. And it makes you think of the book, The Ministry of the Future, where in the beginning of the book, they talk about India. The heat kills so many, and we're not even seeing what we're going to be seeing. This is continuing, right? Kills so many that they had to do solar radiation in the book. Read the book. It's good. So here's some new daily highs. Let's see. These are in Canada. Montreal was 33.7. And Bathurst 37.6. So yeah, Canada up above me. They're hot. They're hot. An interesting study in American Meteorology Society looked at the Andes Mountains and concluded that greenhouse gas emissions may actually reduce the likelihood of drought, although increased aerosols increase the chance of drought. Now, it's very interesting because there is talk about in more mainstream science now about the aerosols. And I'll probably go into that next week. But if you want to learn more about it, go on Twitter. Elliot Jacobson has a little thread on it, and he's shared the scientists that are discussing it that are more mainstream. I think his name is Hofstetter. And yeah, so you can definitely learn more about that. And we will probably go over that in last week in Collapse. Right. All right. So, and that's interesting, actually, that study. This tracks with earlier reports that say 2023 was a wetter than average year, despite many regions experiencing mega drought. Land-only percent of normal precip, January to December 2023, with respect to a 1961 to 1990 base. So if you look, you can see normal precip is, well, anything but. Italy rerouted tourist ferries away from Capri because the town, undergoing a desperate water shortage, could not accommodate the tourists' water demands. Heat stroke and its symptoms is becoming more common, and drought has damaged crops in central China. China is a very big country. They're having it all. just like the United States right now. A study in Science Advances looked at the effect of surface air temperature caused by cloud coverage, which is pretty interesting. Clouds warm the Earth at night by trapping radiation, yet cool the Earth during the daytime by reflecting sunlight back. Long term, on global scale, there tends to be greater cloud coverage at night than during the day, meaning that the cloud coverage asymmetry, therefore, it turns out to be an amplifier of surface warming by both decreasing the daytime cloud shortwave albedo effect and increasing the nighttime cloud longwave greenhouse effect. And here's an interesting website, and I bet our friends over at American Resiliency have seen this. From University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, it allows you to search any of 40,000 places on a map and check the climate forecast for the year 2080. So let's take a look at this. All right, now, what will it feel like in 60 years? Now, I had it set up, so I don't know what happened to it. Settings. Oh, isn't that fun? Okay, here we go. So we can look at some place. Is there any place any of you want to look at what the climate's going to look like in 80 years? All right. If you don't pick, I would like to, well, we can look at South America. Let's look at Argentina. I'll get this bigger. And you go by and you pick out the circle. So we can pick out the circle and it will tell you right now in Bahia Blanca, Argentina, which is the selected city. And I picked that because what's down below? Keep going, going, going. The South Pole. Antarctica. Okay, for high emissions, summers in Bahia Blanca, Argentina are expected to be 3.7 C or 6.6 Fahrenheit warmer and 11.3% wetter. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. Winters are expected to be 2.8 C or 5 F warmer and 1.7% drier. The vegetation type is temperate grasslands, savannas, and shrublands. So climate conditions similar to Bahia Blanca, Argentina's climate in 2080 can be found today in Diamante, Entre Rios, Argentina. So it's going to change, and this is pretty cool. I think that, let's see, maybe we can look at, where else can we go? Should we go to the United States? Should we go to Australia? No, let's go to the clueless moron country of idiots. My own very astute, wonderful country. Let's look at Florida. Let's look at, well, you know what? Should we look at Tallahassee, where the governor is? Let's see if it has it. Okay, Tallahassee, Florida. Come on. Where's your little circle? Well, it had a little circle. I wonder why that's not coming out. Hang on. No, it's not. Well, that's disappointing. I wanted to look at Florida. And it certainly isn't working. Well, maybe Pensacola. Very different. I don't know why it was working, but you could check this out yourself. I think that you might be interested in this. No, I'm kind of like frustrated actually, guys. I really wanted to see what was going to happen in 60 years in Florida if they're not underwater. It'll be gone, Judy says. Hi, Judy. Yes, we have a Floridian with us. All right, so we went through that, the city app. Let's go back to collapse. So that was this. The link will be in there. It should work for you. And don't forget, American Resiliency channel. Go and subscribe. There is a lot of information. You want to learn about your state? Go there. You can see what's the best states where you want to go, where you could go if you are mobile. I mean, we're already starting to see climate migration in the United States. And let's see what happens in South Dakota and Iowa right now. So they use the database based on predictions made by the IPCC, and it does not account for all possible climate factors, like an early breakdown of the AMOC, which we've talked about, which I started talking about in 2017. Jim and I do shows on that. You can also customize your settings to measure for an optimistic reduced emissions future. Oh, really? An optimistic reduced emissions future. What do you think, guys? We're going to have that. Is it going to happen? Oh, boy. All right. So that is, one can only what? Hope. You can also customize your setting to measure for an optimistic and also see the average of 5 forecasts. Some scholars disagree with the methodology used by the IPCC to forecast. So let's see what that was about. That was one I didn't pick. So in the conversation from June 19th, the problems with climate scenarios and how to fix them. Faced with uncertainty surrounding climate change, policymakers and investors need to know what can happen and how likely these outcomes may be. Unfortunately, current scenarios answer only the first question, and at that, only partially. Research carried out at the EDHEC Risk Climate Institute tries to provide approximate but actionable answers to the second. Climate stress testing dates back to the 1990s when teams of scientists collaborated to create a scenario framework that was to set the analytical standards for decades to come. They did so by sketching out a handful of narratives about how the world may evolve socially and economically. These are now referred to as shared socioeconomic pathways, the SSPs. The narratives were combined with a range of projected carbon emissions known as representative carbon pathways. Each narrative was run through every emission projection using process-based integrated assessment models, which were fine-tuned on a case-by-case basis to reflect as closely as possible each of the narratives. At this point, the only degree of freedom left to match the narrative with the emissions projection was the social cost of carbon, roughly speaking, the tax that should be levied on the consumers of carbon emissions, whose proceeds should be channeled to emissions reductions. So this is an interesting. I want to go down here to this. Could the IPCC 6 narratives be the most likely ones? We can't tell because no probabilities were associated to the scenarios. And this, we contend, is the second big shortcoming of current scenarios. Without any probabilistic information, we cannot tell which scenarios we should really worry about and which can be safely set aside. So there was 3, the narratives. They had the variables, the IPCCs, and then the third problem is the modeling choice. So this is interesting, and the scientists are squabbling about the models and what's going to help us see the future, and that the probabilities of the 10 most likely scenarios, which together account for more than 60% of total probability. And, of course, temperatures in various scenarios, scenario probabilities, and then what we present should not be regarded as the final word on the matter, but as a work in progress project. All right. Despite its limitations, we think our approach is a useful step in the probabilistic direction towards which scenarios must move. So this was published, and this was who? Does it say who wrote it? That's what I'm looking for. Oh, Vivian Lamb, Associate Health and Biomedicine Editor. All right. Interesting. The problems with climate scenarios. We have problems with climate scenarios. All right. Future climate. Oh, I see. No climate analogs found. Future climate for this location is expected to be unlike anything currently found anywhere on Earth. So there are no climate matches for this location. Ah, yeah. A study in Science Direct examined the economic costs of Aedes mosquitoes carrying dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, among other viruses. The scientists believe the economic cost is underestimated and projected to worsen. The cost of treating the sick is far more than the cost of managing the spread of the mosquito virus, but, right? What's the but? Budgeting for prevention requires long-term thinking and acting responsibly, which we know is not common among Homo sapiens. Acting responsibly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, okay. All right. Rising heat is overburdening India's electric grids. Especially as air conditioners are made more widely available. Oh, I see a comment I need to highlight. Wait. Oh my goodness. Oh no, I don't want to. I want to make sure I get this, but I'm not sure. We'll look at these after. If you have something that you think is really important and you want me to read it, put a Q, because I want to get through this. So, India and their electrical grids. Wow. Power consumptions in the northern state of Punjab has increased by 43% so far this month compared with the same period last year. Another major growing power suck, AI, has propelled NVIDIA to become the most valuable company in the world. The AI demand is just beginning. Now, let's have a little talk about this, about India. Isn't India the call center home of all? I mean, isn't it you call an India, everybody in India takes the calls? I know that. Big corporations have that. So those call centers also must suck up a lot of energy and a lot of air conditioning. And so the people that are lucky to have these jobs in India, well, they they can stay cool, but nobody else can. But really think about that. And he didn't mention it in the article, but I was thinking about it because I have friends that work with people in India in call centers that were outsourced to them. So the AI demand is still only beginning. Now, did I take that one? Yeah, here we go. The new Select president warns of AI electricity demand impact. The new president of Select, Scotland's largest construction industry trade association, and I told you we go around the world, has issued a stark warning about the increasing electricity demands driven by artificial intelligence. Wow. Mike Stark, who recently took the role, expressed concerns that the UK's national grid could face significant pressure owing to the growing energy requirements of AI systems. Speaking about the situation, Stark highlighted the immense energy consumption of AI technologies, likening their usage to that of small countries. AI is becoming more embedded in our everyday lives, from digital assistants and chatbots, helping us on websites, to navigation apps and autocorrect on our mobile phones. And it's going to become even more prevalent in the near future. Kind of like the Bitcoin controversy about the power Bitcoin supposedly uses. Stark further noted that the cornerstone of AI infrastructure, data centers, are significant energy consumers. Data centers, which have many servers as their main components, they need electrical power to survive. It is therefore only natural that they talk about building a data center any talk should begin with figuring out the electrical needs and how to satisfy those power requirements. Current renewable energy systems have been able to both support increases in demand and to bolster the national grid. However, Stark warned as technology advances and systems such as AI are introduced, there will be a time when the grid will struggle to support the demand. Ya think? Stark, who has over 4 decades of experience in the electrical industry, underscored the projected impact of AI on the electrical infrastructure. He noted estimates suggested by 2027 that there could be up to 1.5 million AI servers operating in the UK, consuming between 85 and 134 terawatt hours annually, comparable to the energy uses of countries like the Netherlands and Sweden. That's insanity. Reflecting on the industry's long-standing concerns regarding electricity supply, Stark remarked, I remember attending an EV training session about 25 years ago, and the standing joke was, where's all this electricity going to come from? We all felt the network needed upgrading then, and now there is extra pressure from the new AI data centers springing up. I'm just going to move down. He reiterated the importance of regulation and called for more trained electrical apprentices to meet the future demands of society. We have to have people who are qualified, skilled, and knowledgeable to be able to introduce and oversee this new technology, which is why we need to be more properly trained and suitably qualified electrical apprentices acting as the vanguard of the industry. That was data center news. So, really quickly, when you think about data centers and you think of AI, and so many people don't even realize what they're doing on their phones, and what's happening is Chat GPT, people use it, or Meta AI. Now it's you put something in there. And something I noticed about the climate deniers, those people that are always screaming about electric cars and how the grid can't take it, but they never ever think about what what are they using in their own hand? What are they using in their own hand? No, of course not. No. All right. So the 2024 statistical review of World Energy Report came out a few days ago, and its 76 pages cover energy developments and consumption in the year 2023. It reports a still rapidly industrializing China, producing and consuming coal, wind, solar, LNG, and oil. China has also exceeded the U.S. in its capacity to refine oil for the first time, and that brings me to another video, something that is going to show us a little bit about what's going on in China. Hang on, and we will get there.
The Duku Highway that runs through Karame in northwestern China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region has become ground zero for China's expanding auto industry as they perform essential tests on new energy and hybrid electric vehicles. With its diverse climate conditions, including extreme temperatures, high altitudes, and varied geographical landscapes like deserts, mountains, and plains, it's the perfect location for the industry's vehicle testing facilities. That's because as altitudes and temperatures increase or decrease, changes to atmospheric pressure can affect both the batteries of EVs and the fuel economy of hybrid electric vehicles. Tests to evaluate power performance, range, and fuel consumption are conducted on icy, dusty, and high-speed surfaces. That's key to the industry's export market, as vehicles are destined for a range of landscape scenarios around the world.
In our terrain and climate, which are highly similar to those in many parts of the world, we can conduct effective substitute tests. These tests help resolve global adaptability challenges for enterprises, thereby shortening their R&D cycles and reducing development costs.
According to the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers, sales of hybrid NEVs surged by more than 80% in the first 4 months of the year.
All right, so there you go. That's what's going on in China. They are developing lots of electric cars for the future, the near future. That's going to be a shit show in the United States. Oh my gosh. I think if Trump gets in, we're not even going to be allowed to say the word China. U.S. in its capacity to refine oil. Oh, they have exceeded the U.S. in its capacity to refine oil for the first time. The global south, which consumes about 56% of the world's energy, is seeing its overall demand grow at twice the rate of developed countries. The report also contains some amazing data tables detailing the various energy production for about 60 countries year by year from 2013 to 2023 and regional energy summaries. Total primary energy consumption increased about 2% over its 2022 level, which is 0.6% above its 10-year average and over 5% above its 2019 pre-COVID level. Consumption of crude oil broke through the 100 million barrels per day for the first time ever. And coal demand beat the previous year's record level, whilst North America witnessed a modest increase in oil consumption of around 0.8%. Demand in Europe fell nearly 1% to 13.9 million barrels per day. By contrast, the Asia-Pacific region saw an increase of over 5% to 38 million barrels per day. Global liquefied natural gas production remained relatively constant compared to 2022. The U.S. remains the largest producer of gas, delivering around a quarter of the world's supply. Aren't we so thrilled about that? We have energy independence, guys. We've made it. Global coal production reached its highest ever level, 179 exajoules, beating the previous high set the year before. The Asia-Pacific region accounted for nearly 80% of global output, with activity concentrated in just 4 countries. Can you guess? Australia, China, India, and Indonesia. Coal retained its position as the dominant fuel for power generation in 2023 with a stable share around 35%. Wind achieved a record year for new build with over 115 gigawatts coming online. Nearly 66% of capacity additions were in China, and its total installed capacity is now equal to North America and Europe combined. Solar accounted for 75%, 346 gigawatts of the capacity additions, with China responsible for around a quarter of the growth. Excerpts from the key highlights. So, business as usual, keep on growing, keep on using all the resources. Never mention overshoot, never mention overpopulation, never mention the key drivers. Look at that, 2023 global energy related greenhouse gas emissions, let me see, exceeded 40 gigatons for the first time ever. 2023. Up, up and away. Yes, we are up and away for sure. And oil. International trade of crude oil was 2.1 billion tons in 2023, which was similar. The Middle East dominated exports, accounting for 41% of the total, although Russia's share dropped by 22 million tons. Its share of the total remained the second highest at 11%. The U.S. increased its share of total exports by 1%, which was rising to 9% in 2023. On the import side, China was the single largest importer at 0.6 billion tons, 27% of the global total. Europe had the second highest share at 21%, followed by the U.S. at 15%. Collectively, China and India increased their imports of Russian crude oil by 53%, while Europe reduced its imports. So this is the whole mess. And coal, pretty much the same. Can you say, we might be so fucked? The New York governor is considering a mask ban on New York City subways and at protests following a backlash to pro-Palestinian protesters. So if you are sick, you have an autoimmune, you have to go to the doctor, you need to take the subway, Kathy Hochul, my governor, is going to tell you you can't wear a mask. She's a fucking idiot. Ohio is also considering similar policies, although mask mandates were necessary in some of these places less than 2 years ago. I think it's free choice. And I think the paranoia is insane. If someone needs to wear a mask, what are you going to do? Arrest a 95-year-old lady who's going to the doctor on the subway in the Bronx because she's wearing a mask because she doesn't want to get sick? And I know a lot of people don't agree. I just think it's live and let live. Free choice. Some think COVID is gone for good. And bird flu may be the next. Nevertheless, long COVID persists for people of all ages. Symptoms of long COVID include, but are not limited to, shortness of breath, cough, persistent fatigue, post-exertional malaise, difficulty concentrating, memory changes, recurring headache, lightheadedness, fast heart rate, sleep disturbances, problem with taste, smell, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. Shit I felt for the last 30 years. Sorry, I had to. 2 South Africans died from monkeypox, or mpox, because monkeypox sounded so awful. At least 5 others were confirmed to have been infected. There have now been, since January 2022, over 97,000 confirmed cases of mpox worldwide, with 186 known deaths, according to a 19-page World Health Organization report. That would suggest a CFR of less than 0.2%. So this is the confirmed cases and where they are in different parts of the world. But we're going to move on. And I think this next story is something that, and I don't know if she's covered it, but Sandy from Left of the Box has a channel. She does cover all about Canada, and I think it's a perfect story for her. A 21-page report on Canadian poverty by Food Banks Canada claims about 25% of people in Canada are in poverty, according to a material deprivation index. So I need to find out from her channel if she has covered it, because I haven't been able to keep up with everyone, and it's sad, but I can't. How can I? Analysts are worried about the potential die-offs of Scotland's salmon as the higher temperatures bring algae and more harmful sea life. And that is here. Spend time on the west coast of Scotland, and it won't be long before you spot them. Dotting the region's locks and bays, salmon farms are a big business. Tourists and locals grumble that they spoil the views, but according to the Scottish government, the industry is worth more than, 1.3 billion annually and supports around 12,000 jobs. Last year, salmon, almost all of it reared in Scotland, was Britain's biggest food export, well ahead of cheddar and lamb. Diners from South Korea to the UAE feast on tons of it. Sir James Maitland, the eccentric owner of a Victorian hatchery in Stirlingshire, sounds very nice, was probably the first Scot to breed the fish in captivity. His recommended diet for salmon, fry, horse meat, and eggs, God, that sounds awful, did not catch on. But the industry took off only in recent decades. Technology from Norway, where the business was pioneered, combined with investment from Unilever, a consumer goods conglomerate, to yield Scotland's first salmon harvest back in 1971. Production has exploded. It has exploded. In 2016, Scotland produced twice as much salmon as it did in 1996. The brand has cachet worldwide. It has cachet. A shadow lies across the industry, and I bet a lot of you didn't even know you were getting your salmon if you eat it from Scotland. A shadow lies across the industry, however. Data from Scotland's Fish Health Inspectorate show a sharp increase in the number of premature salmon deaths in saltwater farms in recent years, you don't say. More than 10 million farm salmon, oh my God, died offshore in both 2022 and 2023, well above the average for the previous 6 years. Include the freshwater farms where vulnerable juveniles are reared, and the figure is higher. So just breed them to kill them before you're even ready to kill them to eat them. Figures from Salmon Scotland, a trade body, show that the mortality rate roughly doubled between 2018 and 23 from 1.18% to 2.35%. Gosh, that's a huge number. Huge number that they are breeding. Earlier this month, the Scottish government began a review of the industry's progress in tackling fish health and rising death rates. Massive die-offs, in which many salmon perish in a short period, play a big role in pushing the numbers higher. Last autumn, one farm near the Isle of Colonsea reported more than 200,000 deaths in 1 week. Moe, a Norwegian firm, spent around 25.3 million dealing with dead fish in Scotland in 2023, according to its annual report. Scottish Sea Farms, a smaller outfit, made a loss last year. Its owner cited biological challenges. Oh, gee. Is that a nice way for saying we're fucked? Warming oceans are partly to blame. Higher temperatures aren't themselves a problem for salmon, explains Ian Barrell of Salmon Scotland, but the heat can foster blooms of algae, jellyfish. Ooh, I've got little buggy on my screen. And some kinds of plankton that damage their grills and cause fatal illnesses. Critics of the industry also point to overcrowding, which spreads sea lice, which it looks like I have sea lice right on my monitor, which I would not have, but I've got these little things crawling on my monitor. Ew. The risks can compound too. Sickly fish might find it harder to cope with lower oxygen levels in warming waters, for example, making bigger die-offs more likely. So what does it look like for the business? Salmon farmers are trying out a variety of solutions. Some companies are putting sturdier enclosures further offshore. Deeper, cooler waters and stronger currents could offer fish a healthier environment. Those sites are harder to monitor far out at sea. Just build a big thing, live in a trailer out there, put a houseboat out there to watch over the salmon. Oh, see, one firm is trying to build huge underground tanks on the Isle of Lewis for farming salmon on shore, but similar projects have been expensive. So you're going to go out to dinner and have a $150 piece of salmon. Other methods, such as placing nets in protective mesh sacks, have mixed results. Scotland's salmon farmers are not the only ones to be affected by rising mortality rates. Gerald Singy, the co-author of a new paper on salmon deaths, says the mass die-offs are occurring across big producers, both in terms of the frequency of these major events and the increased scale of them, but few countries have as much riding on the health of the industry and of the fish within it. So really, seriously, it was very interesting, but did a lot of you know that salmon, it's huge in Scotland? Very big industry. Meanwhile, wet temperatures are damaging some of Ireland's potato harvests. And I have an article on that. Potato shortages. The way the weather is going, it's a bit frightening. Fruit and vegetable shop has tried to encourage customers to try other varieties of potatoes and fill the gap using TikTok. Isn't that nice? And that'll just use more energy. So he's never seen anything like it. In 35 years, he's never seen such a shortage. With previous shortages, suppliers would hold back some potatoes and sell them when scarce, but this year's different. They're completely finished up. So you're screwed on your potatoes. Oh my goodness. Ireland, what are we going to do? The IMF is giving Pakistan another bailout, but the country's plans to raise taxes to guarantee the $3 billion plus is adding unrest to an already unstable society. And the U.S. EPA says that at least 25 of American yards have unstable unsafe levels of lead in their soil. Isn't that wonderful? The full study in GeoHealth, which surveyed tens of thousands of yards, claim we do not think this type of mitigation is feasible at the massive scale required. And was this article? Yep. 1 in 4 households from GeoHealth likely to exceed new soil lead guidelines. So you know what'll happen. They'll just change the guidelines and we'll just eat more lead. So it's all over the United States, but mostly in, blighted communities. I don't have to say where, but it's pretty bad. Key points. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency recently reduced its soil lead screening recommendations. I had read this. We find that nearly 1 in 4 households may now contain a soil lead hazard based on the new recommendations. The finding challenges the current expensive approach, sometimes termed dig and dump, to mitigation at this scale. So come and dig up the yards all full of lead, like everybody's going to have a love canal in their yards, in their neighborhoods. I wonder why they did it. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency recently lowered recommended screening levels for soil lead so every child can have a chance for brain injuries, dropping it by 1/2 to 200 parts per million. Based on a wide network of citizen science collected household soil samples, we find that nearly 1 in 4 households may now contain a soil lead hazard based on this new, more protective standard. The finding challenges the current expensive approach, sometimes termed dig and dump. So what do you say, guys? Are you going to dig and dump your neighborhood? But it's all over. United States, Chicago, they're showing the lead concentration in these cities like Chicago and Hartford and Winston-Salem, Indianapolis, Louisville, Springfield, New Orleans. Let's make it a little bit bigger. It's sad. Lead is nothing to mess with. So now they lowered the lead, and we also now are dealing with PFAS, plastic and testicles. It's just so much fun. The knockout of transmission line in Ecuador caused a nationwide blackout for 18 million people, around the same time as a report of microplastics in 100% of semen samples. Research emerged of PFAS chemicals in men's testicles. So guys, when you are like playing with them or moving them and they bounce a little more, that's because they're kind of made of rubber, plastic. PFAS can also be found in the blood, brain, and even bones, among other places. Skirmishes between Filipino and Chinese small vessels in the Spratly Islands left Filipino sailors and equipment damaged. Posturing around Taiwan's independence has increased since Taiwan's new president won in January, and it may just prove to be more than posturing. Can you tell where we are moving to? We are moving to aggression, war, hate, killing, the human condition. Tension is building over a water treaty between Mexico and the United States, which could be a war. The water wars concerning quantities of water promised to the U.S. Difficult to give up amid a serious drought, and I think I may have a video on that. Let me see. Oh, I don't know. Actually, I don't think I do, but I did have all right. I didn't have one. Sorry, guys. You'll just have to listen to me. In Haiti, displacements continue from gangster fighters. 5% of the country is said to be displaced, while half of the nation faces acute hunger. A drive-by shooting targeted the family of Colombia's vice president, probably another escalating violent act by the FARC splinter group known as the EMC, rebels protesting Niger's post-coup ruling junta. Oh, wait, it's junta. How many times am I going to go through that one? Attacked a pipeline which brings crude oil to Benin. Some say the West, or the UK anyway, are already in war against a new axis of totalitarianism led by Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. A long German language report on dangers faced by Germany came out last week. Among the threat profiles, far right violence, Islamist extremism, and cyber attacks from Russia and China are particularly concerning to officials. In Myanmar, fighting which obstructed the delivery of food is pushing 90,000 residents towards a breaking point since many have run out of food, fuel, and medicine. In Louisiana, public schools have been ordered to put up a poster of the 10 Commandments in every classroom. What would you say are the 10 Commandments of climate collapse? You know, we could do a whole show on that one. Yeah, somebody might beat me to it. The 10 Commandments of climate collapse, or of collapse, because we're talking about all the collapses. President Putin's term to end the Ukraine war were flatly rejected. Ukraine confirmed that the legendary Ghost of Kyiv pilot has been killed in action. Russia launched more attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, particularly in Kharkiv. And do I have an article on that one? Oh, I had an article on the water war. Actually, it was looming between Mexico and the U.S. Neither state will win, but I'm not going to do that. I wanted to look at the BBC's article for what it's worth. It is the BBC. Putin peace terms slammed at Ukraine summit. And there was something I don't want to read the whole thing here. Mr. Putin has already ruled out any kind of peace process on Ukraine's terms. The 4 Ukrainian regions he wants Ukraine to withdraw from are only partially occupied by Russia, which claims to have annexed them in 2022. The voting process held then denounced Ukraine and the West as a sham. So nobody's going to stop. It doesn't seem like it to me. I don't think so. And of course, they're always going to say, more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. My heart breaks though, because Ukraine, I just watched a video today of bombing of like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, you know, and it's just awful. And the people that suffer are the citizens, the people, you, me. We just don't know what it's like. It hasn't hit us yet. And notice I say yet. I don't hold out any hope that something won't happen. How can the United States, how can Americans think that they're different? Somehow so different. I think it's hubris to think that. Russia and North Korea signed an expansive agreement dealing with defense, investment, aid, and more. Another trespassing of North Korean soldiers into the southern DMZ section prompted warning shots. Russia's massive ground offensive to take Kharkiv has entered its second month. And 25,000 plus Ukrainians have been displaced from the industrial city. Ukraine's second most populous 1.4 million city before the full-scale invasion. Conscription squads reportedly move through parts of Ukraine looking for draft dodgers to abduct and transport to enlistment centers. These squads appear on public transit, at restaurants, supermarkets, and parks, among other places, and their presence is also damaging to morale. Yet, Ukraine needs the men on the assembly line of death to keep the war going. There will be little rebuilding soon either way. And Russia is also sending teams to track draft dodgers inside of Russia, resulting in more men fleeing the country. Russia has reportedly lost 14,000 artillery units since the full-scale invasion began. And this might not be in this, but Israel is now drafting Orthodox Hasidic Jews, and they're pissed. A 132-page report on nuclear terrorism was finalized last week by a large committee at the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and I think we may do a show on this one, but mix it with nuclear energy because I think it's time for that show. A particularly troubling development is the existence of a U.S. based accelerationist groups who have been deliberately recruiting U.S. military personnel. State actors could potentially collaborate with terrorist groups. The nature of nuclear terrorism is that it involves both state and non state actors, says the summary. That being said, the report begins by emphasizing that it does not foresee an imminent terrorist nuclear attack, but it's pretty fucking scary. Can you imagine the morons that hit January 6th at the Capitol, and instead of the regular assault weapons they have, but they have their own little mini nukes? Don't say it couldn't happen. The largest munitions depot in Chad caught fire and blew up, killing 9 and injuring 46 people. Robbery, shelling, sexual violence, and unyielding fear are omnipresent in refugee camps in Goma, in the eastern DRC, where M23 and other gangsters continue to victimize roughly 700,000 displaced people. Attacks on human rights defenders are a daily occurrence and growing more common. For the many unlucky, there is no post-collapse, only a perpetual precarity into which the future generations are brought through. Stop having future generations. But that's not going to happen. And as Sam and Elliot say, it ain't going to happen. What if war, what is war if not an attempt to influence the minds of others? A 140-page global report on attacks on education, and I know I have that one here, sorry. Yeah, Education Under Attack from Relief Web. Attacks on education in war surge globally, Palestine and other conflicts. So, schools are getting bombed, kids can't learn, just put them right into the war. The researchers recorded the highest numbers of attacks on education in Palestine, Ukraine, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Well, what did you think? In places like Gaza, in addition to the horrific loss of life, education itself is under attack. Quite disgusting. They rose. Gaza, 475 incidents in 2023, with more following. Over 80% of schools in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed as of April. The full report has breakdowns by country for those interested, and I think if you're in education, it's something you should be interested in. Although when you think about the United States, we're having an attack on education. Banning books. The right wing is banning books, dumbing down, want to take public money out of public schools. They want vouchers. They want religious schools. So there's a war here too. It's just not, front page on the New York Post. Israel's top officials are allegedly finalizing plans for an all-out war against Hezbollah, following months of tit-for-tat strikes by both sides across the Lebanon-Israeli border, which have displaced about 150,000 combined. In Gaza, a cash shortage is unfolding as a result of armed bank robbers seizing currency holdings. God. Over 100 Palestinians die each week, with hundreds more injured by airstrikes and ground fighting every week. One airstrike in Gaza targeted a senior Hamas leader, slew 38 people. And the guy probably wasn't even there. Meanwhile, the Greek-owned Liberia-flagged Filipino run, say that like a tongue twister, the Greek-owned Liberia-flagged Filipino run coal carrier known as the Tudor has sunk a week after Houthi rebels attacked it with missiles and a sea drone. It was the second cargo ship sunk by the Houthis after October 7th, after the Rubimar. In Gaza, since garbage services have stopped, 300,000 tons of trash have piled up so far, causing vomiting, diarrhea, and skin rashes to the many forced to live amid the worsening squalor. 57% of Gaza's cropland has been damaged. Real gross domestic product in Gaza has declined by over 83%. And I did make a video on what it was like there before the war. And it was pretty horrible when the war started. It's not even a war, it's a slaughter. The food supply chain, it's a genocide. There, I'm saying it. The food supply chain in Gaza has been severely disrupted. Over 1 million people have been forced out of Rafah since the onset of the Israeli forces' ground operation there on 7th of May. Access to water is critically low, with people having to queue for long hours to collect it and being forced to rely on seawater for domestic use, which is not desalinated, by the way. People are using shallow pit latrines, and there is a continuing spread of communicable illnesses amid sewage overflow, the proliferation of insects, rodents, and snakes, and a near total lack of hygiene items and sanitation facilities. Now, think of what the Mediterranean must be like off the coast of Gaza. Don't eat any fish there. There are also growing reports of gender-based violence, particularly domestic violence and early marriage. No distributions of our food or food parcels have taken place recently, and basic food items on the market are largely unaffordable. Excerpts from a short UN report: nowhere is safe in Sudan. Nowhere is safe anywhere. And I do have a video, and we're going to see this one. Nowhere is safe in Sudan.
The biggest hunger crisis in the world is unfolding in Sudan. What's worse is that it is man-made. You heard that right. The phrase starving to death takes on a whole new meaning in this African country, where more than half of the country's 45 million people are in urgent need of assistance. They say that as much as 5% of Sudan's population could die of starvation by the end of the year. Sudan is already the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, and now it is slipping towards a humanitarian disaster. How did Sudan get here? Our next report getting you all the details.
Hunger, hot weather, horrors of war. Since a power struggle between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces erupted into civil war last year, Sudan has been plunged into a devastating crisis. Hunger that is threatening millions. Sudan is facing a famine, the world's deadliest in 40 years. With aid deliveries blocked by warring armies, around 756,000 people in Sudan are at risk of catastrophic food shortages. What led to this dire situation? Not bad harvest or climate-induced food scarcity. This famine in Sudan is man-made. A direct consequence of actions by both sides of Sudan's civil war. As a result, an estimated 25.6 million people, that is 54% of the Sudanese population, face critical food shortage. More than 9 million people are in an emergency situation or worse. But this is just the latest projection by 8 agencies. The Sudanese government is military controlled. It has previously denied that there is a famine in the country. The new analysis was done by Rome-based Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, an initiative of UN agencies, regional bodies and aid groups. The data is expected to be incomplete. They blamed security threats, roadblocks and telecommunications outages in Sudan for hindering their ability to do a proper assessment. In Sudan, fighting broke out in the capital Khartoum in April 2023. Since then, it has quickly spread across the country, reigniting ethnic bloodshed in the Darfur region. The war has forced millions of Sudanese people to flee. As of now, the number of people internally displaced in Sudan surpasses 10 million, which means that the country is already experiencing the world's largest displacement crisis. Last month, UN agencies said Sudan was at imminent risk of famine. About 3.6 million children are acutely malnourished. But whether a famine will be declared in Sudan still remains unclear. But if the latest projection for Sudan stands, at least 756,000 people in Sudan will face Phase 5 catastrophe between June and September of this year. This means that Sudan hasn't technically reached widespread famine conditions, but it is still considered a major crisis. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Good channel. They have accurate reporting. And so, Sudan. Sudan is one of the biggest tragedies of our time. It really is. So, that was last week in collapse. And it's tough. It's tough to look at all this stuff around the world and not put it all together as just so awful, you know. And there's nothing we can do, but it's better to learn. Of course there's things we can do. Look at all the humanitarian organizations that are going to all of these countries. These are the people that are amazing humans. There are amazing humans, and those are the people that go and help other humans, especially in war-torn countries. I mean, there's Doctors Without Borders. There's so many, but we tend to talk about the worst of the worst, but there are the best of the best. And some of you are probably right here in our chats. So thank you. I do have 2 more videos, actually. I know it's a long show. I think I'm going to show this one. It's of what's going on in the United States before we end. While I have your attention, because this is happening, and it's quite it's happening now here. And I think about the people in Minnesota with the dam that's going, and we'll watch this one for the end.
Was killed in South Dakota, and evacuations were ordered in parts of Iowa after days of rain caused rivers to overflow in several parts of the Midwest. Jennifer Merrill's in Waterville, Minnesota, where the National Guard expects to arrive today to help with the massive flooding.
Here in Waterville, parts of the city are underwater.
They said it's only going to get worse, and so we're just bracing, and hopefully it's not going to get any worse than this.
A state of emergency remains where up to 18 inches of rain fell here. The National Guard is expected to arrive today and help with the rising flood waters.
We're making sure first and foremost people are safe, protecting property and protecting public infrastructure.
Parts of Iowa are underwater too. Drone video over Rock Valley shows only roofs and trees are visible from above. There were 250 water rescues on Saturday alone.
I can tell you the devastation is severe and it's widespread.
The state's governor issued a disaster declaration in 21 counties after more than a dozen rivers flooded in the northwest part of the state. In South Dakota, at least 1 person was killed after heavy rains and flooding inundated the eastern part of the state. Floodwaters there will continue to pose a threat. Across other parts of the Midwest, severe weather spawned 6 tornadoes that struck southern Wisconsin over the weekend. In Argyle, storms flattened the historic Apple Grove Lutheran Church, founded in 1893.
Minnesota senators visited the area yesterday and said they're working with the federal government to provide more assistance to hard-hit areas. The chance for more storms here remains low, but other parts of the Midwest will be on alert later today.
Iowa's governor says in almost every community impacted, the rivers crested several feet above record levels from the floods of 1993.
Wow. They crested higher than 1993. So I guess we've got some problems, huh? Well, so that's the show. We went around the world. I want to thank two people for Nadia. Secular Talk says climate apocalypse is underway. Really? Secular Talk, huh? Well, if he's saying it must be happening. And sea lice is the new shrimp, Cynthia. Thank you. Sea lice is the new shrimp. Yeah. And bugs on the screen. So you guys having a good conversation out there. We have been an hour and a half long show, but if I do, usually 2 long shows a week, that's it. Watch at your leisure. I want to tell you guys something on YouTube. I have more viewers. We have more viewers on Twitter. We've got 98 people watching on Twitter than we have on YouTube. Honestly, more people watching on Twitter. That's pretty wild. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. I will not be here on Friday. I'm taking Friday. I need it. I haven't even finished. I'm behind on everything here. And we had it didn't hit 90 but once, right? But it was very hot for June. And we had rains. I had a tree go down on my property. I watched it go down. We had torrential rains. The gutters are leaking. This is things that are happening to everybody, but I have a home. I got stung by a bee twice, and it's been itching me throughout the whole show. But I got everything cleaned up. So yeah, no show on Friday. I just have to decide if I have time, which I probably won't, to do a best of. I might, I might run one. But all right, guys. So if you are interested in the American primary elections, go on over to the Letter Hack. They're probably still on. And if not, I want to thank everybody that came. I saw Heidi was here, the anti-corporatist. Hi. There were a couple of comments I wanted to, yes, here. I get upset at those who only look at their own little world and don't have a clue what else is happening around the world, which is why I do this show. And I found the way to do the show using a wonderful person's work, and it really helped me. So, I really am, yeah. And Gary, we're going to end with your beautiful, the way forward for each of us to engage fully with love. That has always been the way and always will be. Stay fully engaged. Live with love. Love is the way. Love is the way. And I really love all of you. So thank you very much. I'm out of here. Goodbye. See you next week. Assange is free.